We will have the conversations that few are prepared to have, and more importantly, conversations centered on rationality. Subscribe now to listen to Rational Voices with Sunil. Jim, amazing to have you on today. I was looking on your X and I could see you were in a bit of spot of bother in Moldova. Is that correct?
Well, it looked like I might get arrested, but no, it wasn't quite so dramatic as that. But a lot of my colleagues who were coming from Italy, the United States, Romania, senators, members of the European Parliament, some of them actually were detained upon entry to the country. Some were prevented from coming in. One was actually detained for about 52 hours, Brian, from the United States. But no, I wasn't arrested. It was pretty remarkable, though, to see that kind of conduct by the Moldovan authorities. So, yeah, it certainly made us take a bit of a step back and wonder what on earth was going on at one point. We had Secret Service, secret police swarming all over our hotel at one point. So, yeah, it was interesting.
Wow. Well, what was the reason that the Moldova police decided to arrest those people?
Well, they didn't so much arrest them, but they detained them, took their passports from them, or prevented them from coming into the country. And I think the conference was making Europe great again. And we were talking about things like the green energy deal, net zero, mass illegal immigration, those types of sort of anti-globalist policies. And I think that the Moldovan authorities panicked. I've heard unofficially that some of the reasons they gave to those people were that it might be a risk to public order or public safety or even national security. But that's not what the conference was about. We were just having debates. We were having discussions on stage. I was one of the guest speakers there. And I think they maybe just panicked a little bit. And I think it's sort of synonymous with the globalist mantra about censorship. You know, J.D. Vance called it out at the security conference in Munich a few months ago. But I think it was a gross overreaction. And I think once the American embassy stepped in, the matter was dealt with very, very quickly from our American friends' point of view. But yeah, I think they just fear the people waking up. They fear a contrary narrative to what they're trying to do and what they're trying to say.
If anything, it just gives more awareness to your organization and other groups about problems with censorship. So if anything, they've just made that situation so much worse. I for one, wouldn't have known about maybe the event, maybe everything that had happened, but by them doing that, I'm now well aware, and now I'm, I think the problem's even worse than what I thought it was.
Well, it certainly drew a lot more attention to it, you know, when you've got US citizens or Romanian senators or members of the European Parliament being prevented. And remember, you've got to remember, they have diplomatic passes, they have diplomatic passports. That's not the way a country should be behaving, unless there is something very seriously wrong with those people coming in. But these are our elected officials. They were there for a conference talking about European unity. You would have thought they would have been very happy to have a conference like that taking place. But on the second night, it became quite apparent there was a huge concern by the Moldovan authorities. We had seen police, and police, when I arrived on the Friday, were out in sufficient numbers. But then the secret police came in with their earpieces. They were coming in and they were sitting and observing people coming in and out of the hotel. They were observing us at dinner in the hotel. So we didn't really know to what extent this was going to go. We didn't know if the hotel was going to be sealed off or we were going to be arrested or detained for some reason. But I'm glad to say that didn't happen, and I've lived to tell the tale.
Amazing. And how does that make you feel about Europe at the moment in general, in terms of specifically freedom of speech and censorship? Was that something that was discussed at the conference? And we've obviously seen in the UK that there has been a clampdown on freedom of speech. Would you say that's prevalent across Europe?
Oh, yes, very much so. That's why I said earlier on that J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, had called it out some months ago at the security conference in Munich. Yes, censorship is a huge problem now, especially in the United Kingdom, the mother of all parliaments, the seat of democracy, the Magna Carta. But if you say something that the state doesn't like, a meme, a post on Facebook or on Twitter or X, yeah, it can get you into a lot of trouble. And it doesn't have to be particularly wild. It could be just an opinion, perhaps, on mass illegal immigration. But yeah, it is. There are a lot of journalists who have been arrested and independents within the media who have had court cases against them. So it's certainly not free and fair in the United Kingdom. And I think that's quite synonymous, in particular in countries like Germany within the EU and France, of course, as well.
Yeah, no problem. I was wondering what profile of people were at the conference. So were they mainly people more right-leaning or left-leaning, or was it just a complete mix?
I would say there was a complete mix. There were people from the United Kingdom there who were former Conservatives. Was one member there from the House of Lords. There were people from America, business people. There were parliamentarians from within the EU, members of the European Parliament, and there were senators from Romania and members of Parliament from a number of different countries, Italy and Germany and many nations. So it was a bit of a mix, but I would say probably slightly right-leaning. But it was sort of fairly open topics of discussion to do with net zero, the Green Deal, or the reasons why that shouldn't be taken forward. There was no real activity that could be construed as being public order or concerns to national security. That was a complete overreaction, and I believe there will be diplomatic repercussions, I think, probably for Moldova somewhere down the line. I know, having spoken to one of my colleagues from the United States, that as soon as the US Embassy became aware of the situation, they had people on standby who were about 2 hours away that were being prepped and ready to come to the hotel. So they were taking it very seriously.
Wow. I mean, so we're talking about the conference. I think it'd be good for people to understand more about your organization. And so to get a better insight into what you're doing, I was reading a bit about the Freedom Train International, but I think it'd be great to just get a general overview for our listeners who aren't aware.
So Freedom Train International is the largest and fastest growing freedom movement in the world. I didn't know it was going to become such. I had gone a couple of years ago to Ottawa in Canada. Prior to that, I'd been across 8 different states in the United States on stage speaking to people. But when I came back to London, I went over to Ottawa. I was there with a member of the European Parliament, Christine Anderson, and Eva Vlaardebroek, who's an influencer from the Netherlands. And we met the leaders of the Canadian Trucker Freedom Convoy movement and a lot of military veterans and people that had been involved. I was incredibly inspired by what they had done and the principled stand they took against the lockdowns and the mandates. And when I came back to London, I decided that I wanted to do something similar to that, but on an international basis. And I reached out to a couple of business colleagues, people that I knew, very, very successful in business here in London. Said, look, I'll buy you lunch if I can just bend your ear for 40 minutes and get your advice. Told them what I wanted to do. And they said, well, it's incredibly ambitious what you're looking to do, but if anybody can do it, it'll be you. So I spent 15 months reaching out to hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, actually, collectively, within the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, and of course the UK. I was doing maybe 7 or 8 Zoom calls per day, 7 days a week. I absolutely threw myself into it. And I built up this incredible network. And then we launched Freedom Train International in February 2024. So it's only been launched there really not that long ago. But we had done the preparations, we had done the groundwork, we had made a very good foundation. And of course, we created the website and all the materials that's on there. And what it does, our primary mission is to unite patriots around the world. And I'm finding that it's had so much success that we've actually been appointing ambassadors. So we now have ambassadors for Freedom Train in New Zealand and Australia, Germany, Denmark, Norway, the United Kingdom, many in Canada and other nations. And what we're doing is we're highlighting those issues, but then providing the solutions. So we're teaching people when they subscribe to freedomtraininternational.org, we're explaining to people what to expect over the coming months and years, how to be ready for that, how to live outside the system if that's what people choose to do. So we have a large amount of information on central bank digital currencies, digital ID, 15-minute smart cities. And of course, we're all about freedom. We're all about pushing back against censorship and supporting other organizations internationally who are doing something similar, maybe more akin to regional organizations. But we are a global organization that have got many ambassadors and many followers and members who support the work that we're doing. And we're traveling extensively, and I've been traveling extensively to Romania. I was invited to the presidential election there to cover that, which I was delighted to do. Went to CPAC in Budapest, Hungary, not long after that. Was in Paris, France. I met Marine Le Pen, had a great conversation with her. And I've been asked to go to Ireland, which I've done 2 weeks ago, to help unite the Irish patriots there. They asked me to come in specifically for that purpose. Because I'm a Scottish Highlander, I'm not actually Irish. So they wanted somebody that was closely connected to Ireland, but not part of it, to come in and help facilitate those meetings. I have to say, that went down extremely well. And we had a number of different groups around the table who found broad agreement. So we're focusing on the things that unite us rather than the things that divide us. And the globalists are only too good and too adept at sowing division. We are sowing unity because unity is strength.
I think your organization is needed now more than ever, to be honest. I think in particular, when you see what's happening in the UK. I mean, I think probably largest audience is UK and probably US on here. But what's happening in terms of the UK, even just this week with the online safety bill, I think there's a lot of disturbing stuff that's gone on for quite some time in the UK, but probably been accelerated even more since the Labour government. What are some of the things that you're seeing in the UK that scare you the most when it comes to freedom?
I think a loss of national pride, a loss of national identity, a reluctance to allow people to carry the flag, which is just a patriotic thing to do, regardless of which country you're in. And I think when people start to feel that their voices are being silenced and people are being punished for speaking out the truth and raising concerns that matter to them, then it creates a climate of fear, which we saw in particular over the course of the last 4 to 5 years, where fear was used to intimidate, to silence, to coerce, especially during the pandemic. And this is a tactic that globalists use. They worry people, people cause them concern. What we're always saying in Freedom Train International is, don't be scared, be prepared, understand what it is they're trying to do. And when you do that, when you get prepared and you understand that mentally, physically, spiritually, then you lose the fear. And I think that is where we see overreactions like we saw in Moldova, because we are, in fact, winning the information war. And there is a war of words, a war of ideas, a war of ideologies taking place here. Many have said, and many did at the conference, that there was a spiritual war taking place. This is about attacks on what it means to be human. Humanity itself needs privacy, regardless of where we come from or what faith or religion we subscribe to. We all need that freedom to practice our faith, to practice our beliefs without being made to live in fear. In the United Kingdom, we know that there are Christian groups, Christian pastors who are being removed from the streets, arrested even by the police for practicing their faith. That's not acceptable in the United Kingdom. I don't think it's acceptable in any country, to be honest. But that is certainly something that we've been seeing happening more and more in the United Kingdom. I just saw before I came on with you that they're going to roll out even more facial recognition cameras all across London. So once again, it's all about controls, a sort of a dystopian Orwellian type situation that we see in the United Kingdom. But this is also happening in Europe. And that's why I've been traveling extensively, Sunil, to bring people together to unite Europe, because I believe we face an existential crisis, and I've repeated that particular message fairly robustly over the last few days.
Where do you think where do you think these globalists are coming from? What do you think their agenda is? Naturally, when we've had plenty of people mention globalists on this podcast and really be critical of them, and often the rebuttal is, "Oh, this is just a conspiracy," and all this sort of stuff. I think you and I both that's far from the case. But what do you think? the overall globalist agenda is, and maybe more importantly, how have they gained this much power?
Well, the globalist orders are quite varied, and they're actually quite competitive with each other. So you've got the Council of 300, the Trilateral Commission, the World Economic Forum, and it goes on and on and on, the Bilderbergers. They all compete to a certain extent, but there is one thing that unites them all, and that is a desire for a new global one world government or order that they control. And with the advent of modern technology, robotics, advances within technology, advances in particular within artificial intelligence, many of us believe that they have now got to the point where they believe that they can control the narrative using those types of tools. And it's all about control, Sunil. This is about total control over every aspect of what it means to be a human being. When you have digital ID, central bank digital currencies, 15-minute smart cities, and the geofencing within them, what that will mean is that when people try to leave those districts, and yes, they are actually calling them districts akin to the Hunger Games films that we've all been watching, this means that your money may not work if you go to a different district without permission. This gives a huge privacy concern to those of us that advocate for freedom and autonomy. If they can actually see everything that you're spending your money on and they don't like it, with digital currency, they will have the power to stop you from making that payment or to sanction you if you speak out against the system or the state. And once again, we've seen globalist infiltration within our national democracies, within our parliaments, our governments, but also within the health service, the policing, the intelligence communities. They exist there as well, and they're working very much in lockstep with each other. We saw that during the pandemic. We saw how they came out with exactly the same policies. And those of us that understand the psychological operation side of things could see those red flags right from the very beginning. But yeah, mass manipulation and using fear to control people is what they do. So that's why we're always reassuring people, giving them alternatives and finding solutions for these issues that we face in our modern world.
I think, what's really fascinating what you're saying in terms of the control aspect. I think what's really, really scary for me, and why I think this is a really serious issue, is COVID and lockdowns. We saw how quick it was, how quick people gave up their civil liberties without no fight or very minimal fight from a lot of people. And that really does scare me going forward in terms of as time goes on, because people were, you had examples of neighbors dobbing neighbors in to police if they thought that they were breaking the lockdown rules. And it was, I think, a scary situation where we gave the government more control of little to no fight. And what's even scarier is somebody like me, who's probably always identified more on the right, being a conservative paying member and stuff, and that was the party that I would associate would never do such a thing, and they did. So I suppose my question is, how far are we into this globalist agenda? Because we're seeing some of the right-sided parties who typically are, more small government, they're almost complying with this agenda as well. It's not just the left. So how far ingrained are the globalists?
Well, just going back very briefly to the creation of Freedom International, as I was reaching out to thousands of people around the world, I was learning and soaking up a great deal of intelligence and information that was becoming very clear just how far advanced the globalist institutions had gone and how much they had influenced our elections, our democracy within our governments in our different nations. So the term the uniparty system is a term that a lot of people identify with in Australia, New Zealand, in Canada, in the United Kingdom. So for example, in the United Kingdom, we have the Conservative Party, sort of traditional values, strong in defence, hard on crime, strong in immigration. Well, that's Conservative in name only. We've seen how they operated and why there was such an electoral wipeout at the last general election about a year ago. But likewise, the Labour Party, started by Sir Keir Hardie, a fellow Scot back in the day, would be horrified to see what the Labour movement has become. They were always about traditional working class people, protecting rights, making sure that they were safe in the working environments. Once again, they are only in name only now. They are a globalist, both globalist institutions. So whatever you vote for, whether it's Conservatives, whether it's Labour, you're getting exactly the same thing. They just rebrand it differently. And that's why the advance of other political parties in the United Kingdom is capturing the imagination so vigorously, and why membership is now soaring of those parties that are seen as alternatives to that status quo. And I've heard so many people say, if only we had a party that we could vote for that we actually truly believed in, instead of, and we've all been there, which is the lesser of the two evils or the three evils? Which is the least worst party that we can vote for? Whereas what we really want is a party that we actually like, with people that actually speak our language, that put our needs, our aspirations, our desires, hopes, and take on board our fears for things like mass illegal immigration that's changing the demographics of what it means to be British or Irish or European. These are the things that people are looking for now, and that's why those parties that are starting to form and grow, not just in the United Kingdom, but in elsewhere, like the AfD in Germany, are making such headway. But of course, the globalists don't like that either, because they want to be controlling the narrative at all times. But I think people are waking up. So to answer your question, it's pretty far down the line. I've often said to people, as I said in Moldova, when I was on stage there, we don't have 25 or 30 years to try and fix this or turn it around. We might only have another 2 to 3 years before it gets to that tipping point where we see the technocrats implement through technology, advanced AI, these types of dystopian controls. We must fight now. Freedom isn't free. We must stand up and fight. And I commend you and your channel, and I've watched what you do on your own show, and it's tremendous what you're doing. I commend you for it. Getting that truth out there is certainly important, but offering solutions is also extremely important at this point in time as well.
I think everything you said is so true. I think it's scary in terms of what is going on across the world in terms of the uniparty system, the globalist agenda, and there seems to be little to no fight back. I know in the UK you've got reform really rising, and there's moments where I don't know if it's just them being a young party, but there's moments where they almost go looks like they're going softer. For example, on illegal immigration, and it's really worrying. How does another party, let's say, whether it's UK, Germany, wherever, that are outside the traditional uni parties, how do any of them really break through and actually where the voters will actually be they'll actually vote for these parties? Because it just seems I don't know, again, giving an example, UK, that the right side is getting split, the left side is getting split. How do you see any sort of serious change happening?
Well, there's a number of answers I can give you on that. First of all, you're absolutely correct to say that the right are a bit fractured, and we've seen that in Ireland. That's why they asked me to come in, particularly to help unite the Irish patriots together. But we've had a very positive meeting. There's a lot more to happen on that, and I have agreed to facilitate and chair those meetings until we build that Unity Alliance. We're calling it the Irish Unity Alliance Project, to get that momentum building, and it is building. In the United Kingdom, we've seen Reform, which we're seen as the sort of the go-to party, but there's also been a lot of falling out with Rupert Lowe and others. Elon Musk has heavily criticised the direction of travel there. But what you might not be aware of is another party that has come on scene, and I have joined that party. It's called Advance UK. What's interesting about Advance UK is that it's been led by Ben Habib. And I knew Ben Habib in the Brexit Party when I was a parliamentary candidate at the European and Westminster parliamentary elections. He's a very well-known businessman, but he's also a former member of the European Parliament representing London. And he had actually gone across laterally to Reform UK as deputy leader. And he tried to get the structure changed to give autonomy and accountability back to the members of Reform. And he was ostracised for that. He was banned from speaking to the grassroots members, which in my opinion is highly anti-democratic. And he left, and so he started a new party. I went down to see him the day after he had actually launched Advance UK. I'm very pleased to say that he invited me in after the background vetting and the process that's involved for anybody joining the Advanced UK College was completed. And I was the first member of the college in Advanced UK. And we are going to be setting policy on defence, healthcare, illegal immigration, migration, and all of these big issues. And also, what's really interesting about this is that the college will have the power and do have the power to remove the leadership and the executive members if they break their oath, if they break their contract with the party and the people. And that's completely different to Reform UK, where there's only a select few at the top, the elites, you could say, who can never be removed, who can never be voted out. So Reform needs to reform, but Advanced UK is also now in direct communication with Elon Musk, who's taking a big interest in the party and its movements going forward. So, you know, I'm just an ordinary member, but I'm supporting Advanced UK. I was deeply involved with the Brexit Party, not just as a parliamentary candidate, but I was helping with the background screening and vetting and interviewing of other prospective parliamentary candidates in that process, and I'll be doing that in similar ways moving forward till the next general election, whenever that takes place, probably 2029. It sounds like forever until that happens, but time will come round fairly quickly, I'm sure. But there's a lot to be done in that interim period. So I think in terms of uniting people, that is certainly my personal belief. We need to unite the right. We need to reach out to those other parties who have our similar views to us and create a cohesive alliance so that when it gets to the next general election, there is continuity and there is a strategic process has been applied so that we're not competing with each other. And that way we stand the best chance of actually getting people into Parliament who will work for the British people instead of the global elites.
It's really fascinating. We had Ben Habib on this podcast a few weeks ago, and as always, he was brilliant. And yeah, I think Reform may missed a trick there in terms of not having Ben Habib part of the team. I think you're better off having somebody like that in your camp than not. And I think that was really misguided or whatever happened there. But in terms of when we go against tackling these globalist elites, a lot of people will argue or counter how influential they actually are. That's the big criticism I'm sure you probably get on a regular basis in terms of how big and how much of an impact are they actually having. How do you counter that, and what are some of the signs for somebody who maybe isn't so clued up or so definitely for that there's a massive globalist agenda? What are some of the telltales that they are actually involved in our everyday lives?
Well, I think you just need to look at the way advertising works, the way it's not just the narrative that they're controlling through the use of mainstream media news outlets. It's also the perception of the news, the perception of the messages. And this gets deep into psychological warfare, psyops as it's sometimes known as. So you can see their influence there when you get somebody like Bill Gates that passes $1 million or £1 million to a newspaper editor saying, yeah, I hope you write some nice things about us. And he passes a check across the table. Yes, that is buying influence, and we see that being played out. The globalists, though, would like to have everybody think that they're all-knowing, all-powerful, and all in control. The reality is they're not. And as I said earlier on, there are competing factions within the globalist orders. It's not all smooth sailing. They are just as ruthless with each other as they are with everybody else, sometimes more so. So I think it's about getting people to understand that there are alternative ways of doing things, alternative ways of thinking, and questioning everything. When you see a headline, look past that headline. If you're looking to get the news and what's really going on in the world, don't just go to one media outlet. Go to several, and even better, go to several foreign outlets, because somewhere in the middle is the truth. Go to alternative media, like what you do here on your show. This is where you get that balance, and it's all about balance of narrative, balance of information, and then you have to make up your own minds about it. If you just watch the BBC or you just watch Sky News, you're going to get that sort of westernized propaganda that the Bill Gates and those others like him, the George Soroses, are constantly putting out. Talking about George Soros, his name came up on numerous occasions at the Making Europe Great Again conference in Moldova. So there's once again a much greater awareness of the influence of these very well-funded NGOs, but their destructive nature. And that's why people like Viktor Orban in Hungary, who I have huge respect for, I met members of his cabinet when I was at CPAC Hungary there just a month or two ago. That's why they have such a deep understanding of what's going on, because they see it. They see the manipulation behind the scenes, and we're all being manipulated to one degree or another by these very powerful entities. And I think the dismantling of USAID was a massive step to cutting the funding of that. So well done, America, well done, President Trump, and well done, Elon Musk and Doge. That was a great undertaking. I would love to see something similar happen in the UK and, of course, in the European Union itself. I just wonder what they might uncover there. I'm sure it'd be interesting.
I mean, it's everything you said. I think so many people agree. I think what's absolutely crazy. I saw a few days ago the BBC or Sky talking about the rise in the far right in Europe. They quoted Reform and other European parties as far right. And if you look at those parties and you look at their policies, there's little to nothing that is far right about them, and some of them are barely even right wing at all. And so it was really fascinating to see how much their shift in thinking is. And I want to get your take on that term far right. I'm sure you've probably been called it, and some of the other people that you work with as well. How much has that changed in your experience in terms of how much that's now used compared to, let's say, 10, 20 years ago?
Well, it's a great question. I know that when I joined the Brexit Party, I was a former parliamentary candidate with the Conservative Party in the United Kingdom. When I first became involved with the Brexit Party, I noticed that those in the European Commission were trying to make out that Brexiteers were in some way anti-European. Absolutely not true. I love the French, I love the Germans, I love the Europeans, and I always enjoy spending time with our European friends and allies, which is why I've been travelling so extensively over the last few years, and not just in there, but across the United States and Canada as well. So I think the term far right or extremist or the kind of horrible names that they give us, well, I think it's losing its luster because people are now ignoring it. They now know that people who are raising these kind of issues to do with maybe housing or healthcare or the pressures on our communities in terms of education, simply because there are so many people coming in from outside our country, flooding in and taking all of the resources away. I don't think that's a racist thing to say or a far-right thing to say at all. I think it's just a common sense thing to say. And you're right about Ben Habib. He is an incredibly talented person, and he is deeply patriotic, but he's certainly not far-right. Any more than Nigel Farage, in fairness to Nigel. Nigel was very good to me. I don't think that he's far right either. In fact, I ever really remember coming across anybody who was. And if you're raising these kind of issues and speaking out against the sort of the globalist narrative, yes, they will brand you. They will call you names. As I said at the Make the Europe Great Again conference in Moldova, stop worrying about being called names. It doesn't really matter what people say about you. What matters is what you do. And the time for words is one thing, but the time for action is now. As I said earlier on, we no longer have the luxury of waiting 20, 30 years. We may only have a few years left before we see that tipping point occur. And it's incredibly important, Sunil, that people understand we are facing, truly, in the West, in Western civilization, an existential crisis that is being caused quite deliberately, in particular through the tool of the globalists, which is mass illegal immigration. They're using it to good effect. They are destroying what it means to be national sovereign countries. And going back to an earlier point, the reason they're doing this is because a strong nation that's proud of its identity, that flies its patriotic national flag, is a huge obstacle to their new one world government system. They can't have nations determining their own path forward.
Yep.
They need everybody to be subservient to their global order. And that's why they're attacking sovereignty. That's why they're attacking people that stand up who are proud to be British or French or German or whatever country they are in. And that's why we've seen people being dissuaded from carrying the Union flag here in the United Kingdom so much, whilst other flags are being allowed to be flown with impunity, it would seem. And that doesn't seem right or fair because it isn't. And that's once again upset a lot of people. But that may well give rise to parties like Advance and perhaps Reform as well to make a difference at the polls next time round. We shall see.
I mean, I think what's exactly what you said there in terms of mass illegal immigration, it is absolutely scary what's happening there, even just general mass migration in the UK. I was funny enough having this conversation with my wife the other day, and how I kept saying to her, I'm so worried and scared of what's happening right now in the West, because in 2008, yes, there was a financial crisis, but this is, I think we're almost, if we're not already part of a financial crisis, I think we're very close to one. But I think what scares me more this time is there is a complete demographic change occurring right now in the West, in particular, speaking more on UK specifically, that there is such a mass demographic change there that when we go through this financial crisis and we do come out of it at some point, who are going to be the people left? And I'm not sure there'll be much pride in being British when we come outside of that. So what kind of country are we left with? And I think that is very, very scary. If you see what the mass migration numbers are going on, this is never, I don't know when this has ever been done before, but I think it is pretty terrifying. Is that what you mean by existential threat? Is that the main concern, or do you think there's other things going on?
I think it's one of the main things. I think when a nation that has no borders ceases to be a nation. It doesn't matter what flags you fly, it doesn't matter what buildings are there. If it cannot control its own borders, it ceases to become a nation. And the other very important point to understand for you, and you'll already understand this, but certainly for those people who are maybe tuning in, is that if you put enough people in who no longer have the affinity to the United Kingdom, if we're talking about the UK, for example, they no longer have any kind of identity with our history on these islands, or the culture, or the faith, then that country ceases to be Britain. It will become something completely different. And believe it or not, Ireland is on a whole other level. I don't think people around the world realise this. Ireland is on a real critical trajectory now. So I've been to many places in Ireland. I've done a lot of work over in Ireland. And that's why, once again, they asked me specifically to come in to help to unify and to unite the disparate parties and groups that are there. Because it puts it into context, if I'll tell you this. This is a real figure. So the Irish population has a small indigenous population of about 3 million. That's men, women, children, and the elderly, all combined. But over the last almost 5 years now, the population has increased by close to a further 3 million. Right. Now, just think about that. So that population has become almost to the point where there are more people in Ireland than there are Irish people. Wow. And the predominant age group of those people are between 19 and 30, and they're men. 99% are young, illegal migrant men who are coming in. It's not women and children. It's not asylum seekers fleeing war-torn countries. It is migrant economic men here illegally who are destroying their identification papers, their passports, their driving licenses. They're coming in, and many of them are committing the most egregious crimes, most heinous crimes imaginable against women and children in particular. And that is hugely destabilizing for a small country with a small population like Ireland. Most of the communities in Ireland have small communities, maybe 6, 7, 8, 9, 10,000 in a community. The local hotels are being commandeered and filled with 1,000 young illegal migrant men. Can you imagine what that's happening? Can you imagine the pressure and the fear that causes within those communities? So Ireland is rapidly descending into a point where the young fighting Irish men in their own countries are now outnumbered in Ireland itself. And being Irish, what does it mean to be Irish any longer? Well, It's changing. This is happening in the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Sweden, Norway. It's happening across the West. So when I talk about an existential crisis unfolding before our eyes for Western civilization, that is what I mean. And many of those people who are coming in are from cultures and faith groups that are not synonymous to Western civilization. They are coming in with ideas of not of integration, but domination. And the globalist entities are using them. They don't maybe realize they're being used in this way, but they are being used to destroy Judeo-Christian heritage and history and the track going forward. So it's very, very serious. We don't have long before that tipping point becomes a crisis of its own making. And you're quite right to also point out that the financial crash may not be far away from that either. It will probably be a financial crash that will usher in the central bank digital currency system. But we know that Ursula von der Leyen has already said October this year is when they want to introduce the CBDCs, and Madame Lagarde of the IMF has also been echoing that sentiment too. So there are big changes coming within the weeks and months ahead, and we need to be ready for that when it happens.
The island statistics and stuff you've raised there is absolutely terrifying. I've done some work with Gripped Media in Ireland, and they're pretty good at highlighting some of the issues going on. We have had one of the editors on here and another one of the reporters on here, and they've been really good at saying some of the issues going on. But I did not realize the level of changes that they're going through. I mean, in the case of Ireland, I mean, do Irish people have hope in the sense of with the numbers you've given that they're pretty scaring? And I think one of the issues across the West is the lack of kids being born, children being born, and then you've got another side where the influx is coming, and they do reproduce a lot more than the general native West does. So, is there hope for Ireland?
Yes, there absolutely is hope. If I didn't think there was hope for Ireland, I wouldn't be spending so much time over there. I wouldn't have agreed to go in and unite the Irish patriots and their different political arms together. It's absolutely necessary, and they need to understand that if they do not unite, they're going to lose their country. That really is the bottom line. They must unite, and they must accept help internationally. I know they're a very proud nation, very proud people. But they need to understand that this is bigger than them. They can't solve this alone. And that's why I've built Freedom to International as that unity that is to unify patriots, because even a powerful country like the United States of America has the enemy is within. And up until quite recently, until Trump put a stop to it, the US southern border was porous. It was non-existent, actually. Yeah. There was tens of millions of people coming in there as well. Once again, highly dangerous migrants who had serious criminal records and convictions for the most egregious crimes imaginable. That's why ICE and the federal authorities are moving them out. That's America, but Ireland is wide open right now. And the Irish government are deeply compromised and infiltrated through the globalist networks. So they are not putting the Irish people first. Yes, there is hope for Ireland, but they must unite. And once we get that broad agreement, I'm going to be building that out further. And then we're going to be bringing in much more powerful people from the United States who actually have Irish connections, as well as others from other countries who care about Ireland remaining Irish. So it really is, they're in the fight of their lives, whether they quite realize it or not, they are. And that's going to become apparent over the course of the next few months. But that work will continue. I'm also particularly interested in unifying those areas within Europe that have long-term historical differences of opinion. Great countries like Hungary. I'm a huge admirer of Viktor Orban. As I say, I've met members of his cabinet when I was there. Also in Romania, those two countries are great, powerful countries that have powerful patriotic traditions of family, the institutions of marriage, family cohesion, civic cohesion, and faith. But there are historical differences there as well. And it goes back over many, many hundreds of years, and people have long memories. But as I always tell people, the common enemy are the globalist institutions. If we don't unite and overcome those differences, then we're going to be easy pickings for the globalist orders. And I would love to see Hungary and Romania sitting down round the table, because they're so similar and so magnificent in many ways. They just need to overcome those little historical differences. And once they do that and focus on the things that unite us rather than the things that divide us, we will have a very, very powerful grouping in Europe, including Poland. Poland is another great country. They've got a great result there recently. I've been officially invited to the inauguration. I'll be going there next week. And of course, we've got other nations as well, part of the AUR alliance, and they are making great headway. So there is everything to be hopeful about. But yeah, it's been full on. It's been very, very busy. Even in France, the meeting I had with Marine Le Pen was incredible. She's a great, magnificent French patriot. And I met many members of the French Parliament in the National Assembly there. I was made very, very welcome. I spent about a week in Paris, and it was full on, very, very busy, but very, very productive. So there's a lot of people across Europe. They just need that identity. They just need that leadership. And to be honest with you, I said it in Moldova, and I'll say it again. We need a new Charlemagne.
Yeah. I mean, so many of the points there were so interesting. I want to touch on the point where you mentioned about the people wanting to be part of their own nations, Ireland to be Irish and British to be Britain to be British. What I find interesting, why do you think so much of the West, you gave some good examples of Poland and the great work Hungary are doing, but in general, why do you think so many people in the West have lost that proud of their own country, heritage, and why it's almost seen as a bad thing to say you're proud to be British? It was great to see the English woman player, I've forgotten the name, I think Chloe Kelly, who came out and said, I'm happy to be English. Why do you think it's that? And that made such big news when it shouldn't. It should just be normal for anyone to say. They made such big news. Why is that happening? Because you have to travel around the world. I get to travel around the world too, and I don't see this in any other sectors. You go to Asia, you go to other parts, Africa. All of them are very proud of their heritage. Why is it that in the West that we have this new kind of apologetic and feeling of we're not allowed to be proud to be Irish, British, Scottish?
Well, it's amazing. It's a great question. Some of the proudest patriots I know are maybe second, third, fourth generation migrants that came in from other countries. I mean, Ben Habib, his father was Pakistani. He was raised in Karachi. I don't think I've ever met anybody quite so patriotic as Ben. It's why I love him so much. It's why I stand with him. It's why there was no hesitation to join Advance UK. Look, I think we've been taught, our children are being taught that it's wrong to be proud of your country. They bring up things like the British Empire and all the terrible things they did. The British Empire did a lot of good work out there. Did we always get it right? No, of course we didn't. Have I ever made a mistake? Of course I've made loads of mistakes. Am I perfect? No, nobody is. Not even Elon Musk or President Trump. They're not perfect either. But the point is this. There is a real attack on people, and our children are being controlled and told to think in certain terms. We're being told that to wave your nation's flag is the wrong thing to do. You should carry other people's flags. When the globalists talk about diversity, they don't talk about real diversity. When I go to France, I want to drink French wine, eat French food. When I go to Germany, I want to eat German sausage and drink French beer. When I go to another nation, whether it's an Arab nation, whether it's a European nation, I want to sample and take part in those customs and traditions and pay my respects while doing so. I will honour that country. I will carry that country's flag, as I've done on many occasions, because it's the right thing to do. It's how you pay your respects. And respect is incredibly important when you're dealing with other people in other countries. But a lot of these people in our institutions, in our education, in the United Kingdom, have been taught that it's wrong to be British. It's something that should be, we should apologise for. No, we shouldn't be apologising for it. We should be proud to be British. I'm a Scottish Highlander. And, if you go back far enough in history, 200-300 years ago, English troops did bad things to my country. They did bad things to the Irish. Am I going to constantly hold that against them? No, I have many, many friends and allies in England. But we move on from that. That's why I said we've got to rise up above those old historical differences of opinion understand that we have a common enemy, and that common enemy is messing around with our children's minds through the education system, teaching them that it's wrong to be a patriot, it's wrong to be proud to be British or Irish or French or German. We see what they're trying to do. They're trying to go after the youth. But there is pushback coming. And what we've got to do is be proud of our own independent nations, put our own countries first, but work at the international level to help other countries and other great patriots in those nations as well. And that's what I'm doing. That's why I've been so busy doing the things I've been doing, traveling extensively in the way that I have. But, you know, yes, there is definitely hope. We've got to push back, but we've got to get active. And we've got to get that message out that the West is worth saving. It definitely is.
Definitely. I think that the point you made about Ben Habib having immigrant parents, I think it's really fascinating because I mean Ben talked about this a lot on our podcast where I think I'm the same as Ben. I have immigrant parents as well. And I think we were both kind of going back and forth why we're so patriotic about Britain. And I think one of the reasons that we came to was because I think we know what life could have been in terms of we were told by our parents quite brutally and honest that you're lucky to be in Britain. And although, yeah, you'll have attachment to your home, to their home country where they were born, but your loyalty is to Britain. It's drummed into us. So you feel so much more passionate because you know the consequences of my life, what I'm doing now, what Ben's doing now. Our lives would not be the same had his family stayed in Karachi, had mine stayed in India. There's no chance we having life having that. So you feel so patriotic about what you have. So it's easy to kind of say. And I do also think that, and I'd be interested to get your thoughts on this. Is I just think if you're a white Brit in particular, male, I think it's very hard to be patriotic now, or say openly you're patriotic because the first thing, and I'm guessing it's just, you'll know best than me, I'm guessing it's similar in Europe for largely white demographic people to come out and say that they're proud of their home nation because the first thing people will probably say is you're racist, you're far right, where, you know, is that fair?
Oh, yeah, no, it's certainly not fair, but that is accurate. That is an accurate assessment. Once again, we have to be tough. We have to be robust, grow thick skins. Don't worry about what people say about us. Look, at the end of the day is, I'm not a racist. I love people of all faiths and colours and creeds, and I work and have contact with people internationally all around the world. There are many people in other nations that follow the work I do that aren't white British people. They support me because they know I'm not a racist, but I am calling for humanity to fight back against this evil, and it is an evil that is happening. Sowing division, whether it's on race or culture or whether it's on religious grounds, that's what the globalists do. They keep people divided. There's an old saying, you know, if you shake the ant jar, you'll cause the red and the black ants to fight. Normally they wouldn't. If you put red and black ants in a jar, it doesn't really cause a problem. But when you shake the jar, it causes them to fight. That's what the globalists are doing. That's where the psychological operations come in. We see what they're up to. And more people are waking up. But I think that narrative is collapsing. I think what it means to be a man is incredibly important. We bring much to the table. I celebrate our female freedom fighters every bit as much as the male ones because we're all different. But male and female coming together in unity and harmony is where the magic really happens. And I pay respects. Women are far better at some things than us. It's all about being fair and objective. But, you know, when it all comes down to it, we must be proud of our countries. We must work with other nations together collaboratively on the international scene and support those leaders like Viktor Orban, like George Simeon in Romania, those people who are taking that principled stand and putting their people first, taking a principled stand on things like mass illegal immigration. You know, one of the things that always surprises people when I tell them this, but Viktor Orban, the Hungarian government, are being fined €1 million per day because they won't open their borders to vast illegal migration. I mean, €1 million a day. It's just incredible. But the pressure's on. But these are tough guys. They're tough people. And they're standing firm. And we must stand firm with them. And that's why the work that I've been doing in Romania and Hungary and Moldova and soon to be Poland is so critically important because they're the last bastions of Western civilization that still have those strong elements of family and faith and tradition. We must help them to preserve and protect what they have left. and to reignite that passion within our own countries like the United Kingdom as well.
I think it's amazing work you're doing, and those countries, they get such bad press in our media, but if anything, we could learn so much from what they're doing and how they're responding to so much of the issues that we have in this country. Um, it's been amazing speaking to you, Jim. I have a closing ritual that I do on the show, which is an unpopular opinion that you have that you think should be popular. It can be anything we discussed. It can be completely trivial, but yeah, just an unpopular opinion you have that you think should be.
An unpopular opinion that should be popular. That's actually a hard one. That's a difficult one. I've often believed, that what we need is real deterrence. And a lot of people sometimes get a little bit afraid when we talk about things like real deterrence, because how do you deter pedophiles? How do you deter people from raping women and children? In my opinion, we should probably have capital punishment back in for certain crimes where there is absolutely no doubt that that person committed those heinous acts. It's still a scary subject for a lot of people. People have said, hey, but innocent people went to the gallows before. Yes, that did happen. But with modern advances in technology, where it is 100% guaranteed that that crime was committed by that particular person, yes, I'm a great believer in deterrence. So perhaps there's a lot of people out there that might still be a little bit afraid about the idea of capital punishment, but actually, if you commit certain crimes, then perhaps that is an answer. So there you go. There's probably still an unpopular thing that I believe should be a popular view, but maybe we'll get there yet. So I don't know. Did I pass? Did
Yeah,
that work?
that passes. That passes. That passes. Amazing, amazing. Well, it's been great speaking to you, Jim. And just before we finish, where can people find you and get information on Freedom Train International?
Well, I do a lot of work on X, so it's at Jim Ferguson UK. And of course, you can go to freedomtraininternational.org. That's where our main website is. There's a wealth of information. If you get subscribed onto that, you'll be reading for the next year. There's so much content on there. There's books worth of content on there. And it's all about preparing you, getting real ready, how to protect yourselves, your families, your communities as we go forward into the dark dystopian world that is the globalists. But there's always hope. And as I always like to say to people, as the world gets darker, we get brighter.
Amazing. All those links will be on the bio of this episode, so everyone do check it out. Thank you so much, Jim. Thank you for your time.
It's been an absolute pleasure being on with you, Sunil. Thank you for having me.